The suffering servant crucified. The suffering servant cruise despised. The suffering servant refused to lie. The suffering servant that choose to die. The suffering servant crucified. God in the flesh, but many hated his ministry. Always talked to the Father, praying consistently. He faced trials, even in infancy. Herod tried to kill the child, was filled with iniquity. Obeyed his parents, no juvenile delinquency. Totally perfect, no flaws or deficiencies. He didn't come as Democrat or Republican. He didn't come to earth to overthrow the government. But yet he still spoke with authority, challenged traditional thought, provoked the majority. Why? Cause they thought he should be conquering Rome, that's how they thought it would go. So they strongly opposed how he walked on the road with a godly approach. No political hero, no popular vote. Cats were salty and hating with false accusations, calling him pagan for all of his statements, equating himself with God. He knew he's Messiah. Threw him to the fire by Judas, who's a liar. Haters ridiculed and mocked, critically they talked. Miracles they watched, but tried hitting him with rocks. In the garden from his head, blood dripping as he thought. Yeah, the Christ was sweating blood while thinking about the cross. Crucifixion caused him to be physically distraught. So much blood he lost, body literally in shock. The suffering servant. His enemies were uttering curses, hungered and thirsted, but his suffering worsened. Why? His whole life he was expecting the pain, and on the cross he knew he'd eventually hang. Yes, agony awaits, and this had to be his fate. The stress and the strain left him mentally drained. His message was the same, and never did it change. Imagine in his state, yes, the tragedy was great. Calvary, the place where the wrath of God he faced, crying out to the Father, asking why did he forsake? He died on the cross for the depravity of saints, felt joy in his pain, the cross gladly he embraced. Whole anatomy was scraped, saints he's lavishing with grace. Resisted temptation and the slickness of Satan, full obedience, never slipped or just gave in. What difference this making? He actually relates to the tempting and trials he knows by experience. Suffered under death to show that he's serious. Mocking and flogging, we know that he suffered. God used evil for good, like with Joseph's brothers. People beating his flesh, he was wheezing for breath. Yeah, he died but not defeated by death. A man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Pain was so deep, his life he gave for his sheep. The suffering servant cruise despised. The suffering servant refused to die. The suffering servant did choose to die. The suffering servant crucified. The suffering servant cruise despised. The suffering servant refused to die. The suffering servant did choose to die. The suffering servant